Good evening, everyone. This is the Thursday, November 14th, 2019 Town of Monroe Planning Board regular meeting. Noreen, if you would, could you please do roll call attendance?
Yes, Anthony Vaccaro. Here. Bonnie Franson.
Here.
James McKnight.
Here.
Jeff Manson.
Here.
Lisa McCready is absent this evening. Jason Sorinsky.
Present.
John Allegro.
Here.
With that, we have a quorum. I'd like to next point out the fire exits. There are two in front of me. One is the main door that everybody came in from. The other is over by the kitchen, and then there's a third right behind the planning board here. So with that, let's all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
For all. Come on.
I wasn't sure if Ford was here or not.
I know.
All right, first item on the agenda is Monroe Commons. If you would come up, please, the representatives, and introduce yourselves and let us know all about your project.
Good evening. My name is Joe Fowl. I'm here with Joel Mann and Jay Myro, the attorney for the project. I'll just quickly give you a brief overview of what the project is. This parcel of land is located on Dunderberg Road on the north side. It is a sliver of the piece of Monroe. If you look at the location map, that's actually on the north side of New York State Route 17. The project is actually adjacent to GMB, the large project in KJ that's currently under construction. This project is right adjacent to it. It's the first parcel in the town of Monroe, and is actually, if you take a look at the site plan, we actually have located on the westerly side of the property line the actual proposed. Those are not constructed yet, but those are the proposed unit locations that were approved in the village of KJ, so you can see the relationship of those units in relationship to our property. The proposal is for a multi-use commercial building. It's a 400,000 square foot total. It's 4 floors. There's 82,700 square foot per floor. There is a basement floor, which will be storage. The first floor will be strictly retail, as well as the third floor will be a 39-room hotel and office space, and the fourth floor will be completely office space. We have 2 access points coming off of Dunderberg Road. The most westerly one actually goes into the west side of the site and actually accesses the rear of the property. I'll go over that in a bit. And then there is also a secondary entrance, which is to the east on Dunderberg Road, which we'll call the main entrance / truck entrance. This will actually go into the site. There's a loading area to the east. The main access, our main drop-off area, you can see, is a bus and taxi drop-off in the front of the building. That is all accessing the first floor. Going back to the westerly access to the rear of the building, the 2 of those parking areas will access the second floor, and the most northerly portion of the parking area that actually accesses the third floor. So it's going to be tiered parking. You're going to have the front parking will be for the first floor, then the rear parking will be second and third floor. There's also going to have a complete looped around the lot that goes completely around the building, and we've provided most of our bank parking in that particular area. Based on our parking calculations and based on the the square footages and uses, we've come up with 802 parking spaces. At this point, we're proposing 604 with 198 of banked, which is approximately 25% of the parking spaces. There are wetlands on site. We are going to have to get a wetland permit. We will be staying under the 20,000 square foot disturbance. That is our game plan. We will be making making application for a wetland permit for mitigation.
When you say under 20,000 or under 40,000, did you say?
It's going to be under 20.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Because the disturbance is 20,631, so you're going to reduce that a little bit more?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, the intent was 20,000.
Okay.
We've also, we've actually have a preliminary grading plan as part of this set, as well as an environmental constraints. There's 18 total acres of land, 18.2, and based on our environmental constraints, we come up with a net area of 13.4, and that's what we based all of our density calculations and those types of things as far as the code. And that's pretty much an overview. I'm sorry, we also are proposing, we have 2 proposed wells on site. We are actually in the process of getting close to starting to drill those wells, and once that data becomes available, we'll certainly be forwarding to the board as well. And that's pretty much a quick overview of the project.
With regard to the impervious surface area, 8.71, does that include any pervious surfaces, or that's just purely green space?
No. That actually includes it. What it does, if you take a look at the asterisks underneath that, it assumes that all the banked parking and 65,000 square feet of the constructed parking will be pervious pavement, and that reaches the 65% impervious coverage requirements. So we will require 65,000 square feet of our actual constructed parking to be of pervious pavement.
Thank you. Have our professionals had an opportunity to review the application for preliminary comments? Sure. Why don't we start with your initial review?
Got some notes from our review. As Joe indicated, it's mixed uses on the property, office, retail, uses permitted by right. The hotel use is a special permit use. They also reference storage. Somewhere along the line, we should make it clear, or at least have the board agree to a restriction that the storage is intended for the sole use of the other businesses on the site, that it's not rented storage or warehouse separate use. General layout is quite a bit of retaining wall construction around the perimeter, some of which is fairly substantial in height, with an interior fill area for the development, and then the 4-story building, as Joe indicated, with at least 3 levels of parking from what I'm seeing. The one other concern that needs to be nailed down a little more is that the entire west side, which is along the adjoining KJ residential parcel, shows a retaining wall by others. So this site is dependent upon a wall being proposed by another developer in another municipality. So that is a little different twist than many times we have to deal with. The project also has some alternatives for water and sewer. They show 2 alternatives for direction for sewer discharge from an on-site pump station, and they also show both the on-site dual wells or an alternate, as I understand it, for water from the village of Irish Joel. So that means as the project develops, we're presuming they'll make some progress on which direction they're going. Some initial observations or concerns. The parking calculation, the board should take a thorough look at. The parking calculation uses what I would call a liberal determination of net floor areas, subtracting out all restrooms, stock rooms, lobbies, elevators, stairwells, shelving areas in retail, display areas in retail. Pretty significant amount of subtractions. And on top of that being reduced based on those subtractions, the Joe indicated we're also proposing to decrease another 25% for bank parking. So if you look at the gross floor areas up on the table of uses and areas, the actual nets that they're using for calculating the parking is substantially decreased, well below half for the net, and then another 20% knocked off for reserve parking or bank parking. So, again, the board may find that adequate, but I think that's something we need to give a hard look at. As I said, the unfinished basement, we need to key in how that's gonna be used. I'm assuming that's the storage, but it needs to be further defined as we move on. Building height calculation, we'll drill down on more as the project continues through the review process. It is a little different because there's quite a bit of fill placement and retaining wall construction that creates finished elevations that are not natural, but nonetheless work based on these very tall retaining walls. But we should probably, as the site review continues, give that another review. They're using a 1:60 scale initially, which works for a full overview, but it's questionable as the plan design becomes more detailed if 1:60 will continue to work. So we'll have to consider that. Also, as they develop more detailed plans, there's a lot more dimensioning that's required on the plan, which Joe usually takes care of. I'm sure that will come as the plans progress. Another observation, the waste enclosure, the dumpster enclosure is all the way up on the northwestern corner of the site, which is actually between the second and third level parking. Candidly, I couldn't probably think of a more inconvenient place because it's up, only accessible either going up the ramp on the left or the long ramp on the right, and is all the way in the back corner where you've got grades to deal with and access with, I would call them steep slopes, but slopes that would be less attractive with a large truck if snow removal hasn't been accomplished first. Which a lot of times waste removals first thing in the morning and you don't have the snow plows there yet. So it's a tough location. So you may want to think a little bit more about having that buried in the back left corner. Emergency access, they've provided another access to the right on the plan, which is to the east. We should probably get some additional information on the finish, the gating, and also eventually some input from the fire district relative to fire protection for this 4-story building, to be able to lay out different codes and elevations that are proposed. Joe mentioned the wetlands, also noting that Thunderberg is a county road, so that would be a needed referral and also considered under secret. I'm a little confused as to why there's a sidewalk on toward the end of the emergency access drive that kind of leads off into nowhere. So I don't know if there's something else proposed that we're not aware of, or if that was just a drafting error. We also have the small Stern family property lot on the lower left, the southwesterly corner. We've received a site plan and processed the report, a site plan at that location that involved a multitude of retaining walls. It would probably be a good time for the design of that lot to be coordinated with this plan, since that's an approved site plan. I don't know if they intend to build it as proposed, but then again, that's a separate, to my knowledge, property owner. So I would presume they have the right to build it as approved. Joe talked about the parking with the 3 levels. There's only handicap parking in the front. It's pretty obvious there's going to be an elevator in here, but I would think that appropriate design would include some handicap spaces near the second floor and third floor entrances. Actually, Joe's got some in the left pocket, but not opposite. So it's the third floor level. Maybe we could get a couple. So the second entrance is covered, the front's covered, but nothing on the third. 3% slopes across the majority of the parking areas. That's a very appropriate slope. I mentioned earlier about the steep, or rather not steep, the tall walls. keep in mind some of the walls that are proposed along the rear property line, the long wall along the town of Woodbury line. The walls are up to 39 feet in height, so they're not small. They're significant walls that create concern about not only the construction and the stability, but we also have an access road which presumably will be used by heavy vehicles. So you'll not only have the soil loads and the hydrostatic loads, but you're going to have vehicle loads immediately adjacent to a 39-foot wall, so that's a concern. And the height and type of wall will be something that the board should look at, and also look at the visual impacts of those tall walls.
Where is that at its tallest, Mark?
I have to change sheets for that.
It's at its tallest.
The tallest spot
east.
is
To the east?
to the east end of the long run along Woodbury.
Okay. So that's at 699 and 660.
Yes, and then it goes to like 31, then up 13, and just back up to 17 and approaching 30 on the west northwesterly corner. So it's a significant wall. It has its portions that are only 10, 11 feet, but it goes up to 39. So that's something that is a concern. I mentioned earlier about the slopes getting to the second and third level parking areas. The slope of the left ramp is around 8%, which is reasonable, but then again, keep in mind the maximum allowable slope on a town road, or the county considers slope is 10%. So you're looking at 8% as the only access to those parking areas, and of course the dumpster enclosure. And I believe the long ramp on the back side is 10%. So you're looking at significant slopes to get to those areas. Admittedly, the great majority of the parking, knowing that some of it's proposed as banked, is in the front, which doesn't suffer from those slopes. But during poor weather conditions, access to levels 2 and 3 and the dumpster as proposed could be compromised.
Mark, in general, in your engineering experience, order of magnitude of 400,000 square foot building, and for the applicant as well, what's a comparable size building in Orange County or in the area that's 4 stories, 400,000 square feet that you could think of?
I'd have to look at plans.
Okay.
Too many plans bouncing around in my mind.
Okay.
I don't recall all the numbers. But it's a significant building. What makes this more of a challenge is that you're looking at forgetting pervious versus impervious
Yeah.
for the moment. You're looking at almost a full site being built out. So it's really challenging given the need to wrestle with the slopes and all the finishes. That's about it. I think we need to understand that it needs to go to DPW, county planning, the village of Kairos Joel, the town of Woodbury, all those who would be interested in both the seeker elements and as well the GML referrals. So that is a thumbnail review of the concept plan.
Thank you. Ashley?
As Mark had said, a special use permit is required for the hotel, so that also needs a market analysis under the specific standards, the individual standards applicable to the hotels. It's also going to require a tree plan, and I believe a height variance for the building is required as well. That might change as the plans are reviewed and the calculation is finalized, but it's likely it'll need a height variance for that. It'll be a type 1 action under seeker, and there are a few interested or involved other agencies, so we'll have to send out a notice of intent for that. It wasn't clear to me, is it going to be a public water supply, or, because I thought at one point that was discussed, it'll be
It's
Department of Health
to
approval?
be determined. It's going to be at least a quasi-public water supply. It'll be because of the hotel use. You know, there will be Yeah, but we anticipate submitting to Orange County Health Department and getting an approval from them first. I don't know if it's a complete public water supply. It might be transient, but it will be some type of a public water supply because of the hotel.
Okay, just want to make sure that we have all the involved agencies known before we send out the notice of intent that way.
I would say Orange County Health Department would be involved.
Would DEC be involved? For water supply?
Is there a water taking permit for this? But that's stormwater.
No, just for the water supply. No, DEC otherwise is going to have to review this.
I don't know if a water taking permit would be required or not. I don't know what the threshold is for
I
that.
don't know what the quantity is yet for the site, so that's to
Okay.
be determined.
Yeah,
Okay.
I have to-
Of course, as Mark has indicated, it has to go to the county planning department for the county road as well, and also the notice will have to go to the Village of Pierceville, Village Leader, County Road, and that's it for now.
Okay.
Ashley,
Thank you.
Could you repeat the first thing you said it would need a market review?
Oh, sure.
Market
It's
analysis.
a market analysis demonstrating the demand for a hotel in the area.
Mhm.
Who would do that?
That's something the applicant has to do.
I think as it'd be useful in the beginning of the process if you'd let us know all the consultants you may have retained for the project, because I anticipate that we are going to retain consultants to the extent that, Mark, your office can't cover items. So if we need an ecologist or a traffic engineer, let us know who you're using, so obviously we won't reach out to them. Because I'm sure, there's a type 1 action, we're going to have a robust seeker process, so it's just useful to know in
Okay,
advance.
Absolutely, yep.
We'd appreciate that. Board members, do you have any comments, initial comments?
3 things. Where's your sewer going? Please tell me you're gonna do something about Dunderberg Road. Traffic light, turn lane, something, it's already a disaster. And no, that's kind of this is my third objection to this plan. Outside of that, I'm cool with the concept, but there's traffic.
Okay,
I
what
want
was the third one? I'm sorry. Oh, okay.
Yeah. There needs to be a very thorough traffic study on this one.
And we have hired a traffic consultant
Do you
to
know?
be part of this
Right.
project.
Who?
Do we know yet?
Yes,
Is it Creighton?
Creighton, yeah.
Okay, Creighton Manning. Only because I think they reached out to the planning board to get information from us.
They did the next project too, so they have the
data.
information.
They did the residential project? Okay, yeah. So they would know,
They work with the county DPW for all the improvements, what is going to happen for this project here, so they have all the information here.
okay.
Yeah, you're working with 2 very large schools right down the road.
Yep.
Office hours are fairly similar. This better be thorough. That's all I'm saying. Because that's kind of where my,
Actually, 2 traffic lights are coming now on the road. One will be at the residential project entrance, the other one will be at Dunderberg Road. So that's currently approved and going to be implemented.
I'm just saying, I see 800 more parking spots here. And I know that's not what's being proposed, a lot of it is banked. That's still a significant amount of trips being generated by this.
Although this is not a substantive comment, have you been in front of the town board as far as your fees?
Not yet.
Not yet?
I think we're on the agenda for the 25th.
Okay. So we had agreed, and it was fine to make the first appearance. You have submitted some application fees. So we wanted to hear your proposal, so we understand what's going to be on our agenda for most of probably 2020. But at the same time, we can't move forward until you resolve the application fees with the town board. The escrow fees we can address, but not the actual application fees, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Board members, any other comments?
With the building height calculations, since there's different elevations on the different sides, I guess the way I'm looking at the bulk table, this is what I want to understand. If it's maximum permitted building height of 40, do we use the average height of the building on the four sides, or do we use the highest elevation when it comes down to?
It's-
The average elevation of the finished grade at the highest point, to the highest point of the building. So it's finished grade. So as they adjust their grading plan at all, that's when we can confirm. And I would say fairly early in the process, as Ashley pointed out, there may be a referral to the ZBA.
Can I comment on that? I had sent a letter to the town board requesting a zone change to increase the permitted height to 50 feet. Without putting words in anyone's mouth, it was favorably looked upon. I was asked to prepare a petition for that, to that effect, and it is prepared. I haven't submitted it yet, but that will be going into the town board. Just from the preliminary feedback I got, that seemed to be favorably looked at. So the height will be increased to 50 feet.
What's
So
the
would
area?
it be for the zoning district, or there'd be a specific district?
No, for the HI zoning
Yes,
district.
for the HI.
Okay.
And I
It
would
would be
text amendment?
district-wide.
Just the
And,
plain the text amendment for the whole HI zoning district?
Yeah, the bulk table for the HI zone will be changed from 40 to 50. That's the proposal.
Understood.
so, I guess my question would be, you're making the request, and yet the change would affect other properties, not that there are many, but other properties, so how are we dealing with this in terms of seeker?
Well, the
Is
town
it
board
treated-
is going to have, that's going to be a town board issue.
Okay.
It's a town-wide zone change, so it's not really particular to this project, and I don't believe there's too many other properties in the HI zone that are even buildable at this point.
So they haven't, so you're not submitting a petition to change, it's that you've made a request that they consider it, but the expectation is they're gonna take it up on their own?
No, we're filing a formal petition
Okay,
to change the zoning pursuant to the amendment provisions in the zoning law
okay.
and pursuant to town law.
So I would want to know from our attorney and the town board attorney, again, how this is sort of dealt with from a seeker perspective. Can this be segmented, or is this all part and parcel of the same action? So when we have a chance,
Yeah, we'll look into that and discuss it with the town attorney and see what the application petition actually is and
Right.
go from there.
so you're submitting, but you haven't submitted yet?
I've drafted the petition, I put it out for signature, I'm waiting to get it back,
Okay,
along with seeker and some detailed stuff from Joe, and then we can submit. So we'll get that done in the next 10 days probably.
okay. Jeff, any additional comments?
Not at this time.
Jim?
No, I'm good.
I'm
Anthony?
good, thank you.
Just from my perspective, I would love if you could give us examples of buildings in our area. Single buildings, that would be 4 stories. I was saying I would love to get some information on what buildings in our county or nearby are individual buildings with 400 square feet, just for an order of magnitude for the benefit of the public and the planning board. Because we're at 400,000, right? Okay. Is that with or without the storage?
It's with the storage.
Okay. But the storage is one of the floors, and one of the floors is,
So basically, the storage is 82,000, so if we deduct that, then it's only 320,000.
is the storage entirely below grade?
Yes.
Okay. So visually, we're seeing 3 stories. Okay. Or is the basement, are we seeing some of the
You're
basement?
seeing 4.
You're seeing 4, the basement is an additional.
It's a
four
fifth.
Below grade.
Okay, well, I shouldn't say a fifth, but it's an additional,
Only below grade?
additional floor.
Correct.
Okay, so yes, 4 stories, 400,000 square feet. If there's nothing in the county or just something, that helps us. And I'm only saying the county because then we can drive by it or we can take a look at it. Like, I have no idea what the Crystal Run buildings are, for instance, any of those. Again, just to give us a sense of what
It
We'll
may
make
be,
research.
the mass is.
it might be helpful not only to get a comparable 4-story, 400,000 square foot, but find out what acreage the site is, so you can have
Yeah.
building area, building mass, and acreage to compare to the site.
Okay. the hotel, you'll get us a market analysis, but in general, given the magnitude, or I should say the size of the building, I think you said it was 39 hotel units or guest units, is that the case?
Yes, correct.
And so sort of what's the thought as far as the hotel? Is it a boutique hotel? Is there going to be like events here? Sort of what's the nature of the hotel?
I think Barry Taddick in there.
Okay.
He has a little bit more research on the more details on the hotel.
Okay.
Barry's the architect for them.
Oh, okay.
So
Where's Barry from? Hi, Barry.
There's our architect.
Barry Tarek Architects.
I'm sorry, where you're from?
Barry Tarek Architects.
Okay.
The architect for the project.
Thank you.
And quite simply, it's an overnight stay hotel. There's no events planned. It's not a conference center. It's literally per night.
Is it a franchise type hotel or?
Yeah, they don't have an operator yet.
Okay.
So I don't know.
So and when I say franchise, like a Hilton Garden or a, Hampton Inn, et cetera?
still doing the research on that.
Okay. Is it possible the number of units will increase? Or this is just kind of what you laid out for now?
If it increased, it would be very minimal. The basic layout is fairly accurate for the number of units.
Okay. Do you have a sense of, you're talking about retail and office uses. Do you have any tenants, or in general, what kinds of tenants you're contemplating or this might be marketed to?
I'm not yet determined. We're still doing the research to see what kind of combination we can do with the retail and office with some type of similar industry.
Okay. Jeff?
Yeah, just one more question. So the entity applying in this is Monroe Nininger LLC, and I noted that the next property over the town line in the Woodbury is Woodbury Nininger Estates LLC. Just wondering, is there a connection between the entities or just a similarity in name?
Owners of these two properties?
Yes.
So is that
Talk into the mic, please.
Yeah, it's my understanding that there are common members of the two entities.
Are we aware if there's any plan so far for that property, or is that already built out, or it's
It's vacant land, and I believe it's zoned residential.
Yeah, yes, it is.
It's
That's-
zoned residential,
okay.
so there's no current plan for it.
In the Village of Woodbury?
Correct.
Okay. Village and Town of Woodbury.
Village and town, I believe that's zoned residential. There is no current plan for it.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, any other questions? This is a biggie. This is a large project, and we'll have you back on the agenda, especially once you resolve the fees, but really we need to dive deep into this, even the conceptual plan. I think there's some questions we have with regard to pervious versus impervious, what can be counted, are we allowed to land bank? I think as we go through this, I know I'm going to have a series of questions that I'll be asking our professionals. Some of those questions may need to go to the building inspector, for input, but we'll advance this project.
Okay, one quick question. Are we in a position to be able to contact the town's traffic consultant just to start developing a scope of what he or she is going to be looking for?
Well,
as far as, a traffic study?
So we don't, unless I don't think you all.
One's been selected.
Right, so we need to actually select one. That's why the sooner the better. When I know who your consultants are, we can go reach out and retain our own consultants. And preferably people who've been doing, reviews here in the county, so they'll be familiar with what's going on.
I think where you learn dealing with the next project that Mazer is the reviewer for the county DPW. I'm not sure if it's still current, but I don't know if it's feasible that they should do both for the town.
Right. I know Mazer has what used to be John Collins, so they've got Phil Greeley and those folks up there. So we're going to do that. I mean, we're probably going to have to get an ecologist and some others involved. So we'll see if it's going to be individual consultants or maybe another firm with some in-house capabilities to address
I think once you receive
several
the list
items.
of the applicant's consultants, we should probably.
The three of us, yeah.
Make some suggestions to the board.
Yes, and then bring it back to the board. Okay? We may want to get some qualifications just to show the board. I don't know that we've had this big of a project in a while in the town.
No.
Okay. Do you have any questions?
Yeah, can we just talk briefly about how we're going to start seeker? Do you need more information to compile your list of involved agencies so you can send out your notice of intent?
I think we have to look over the application in detail.
I'll find out about the water taking.
The water taking permit, we know DEC, but which specifically, we know it's going to be Army Corps. Who else did we have listed?
So we're going to probably have to
Yeah.
come back we'll probably have to come back
For the next
for a
workshop.
meeting for you to
Yes.
do a resolution to circulate your.
Yes.
Okay, so I don't know if we'll accomplish much more at that meeting, but I think we're going to have to come back on the
Yeah.
agenda just to get that going.
Well, and I want to make sure that we've gone through the EAF, and then, on the one hand, we want to circulate, on the other hand, we want to make sure the content, at least in the concept, is sufficient to be able to do that circulation. Right now, I'm just looking at the EAF in terms of other agencies, obviously the planning board. This is where I asked the question about the town board, whether or not they are or aren't part of this, depends on how we treat the zone petition. Here, height variance is listed, ZBA, Orange County Sewer District Number 1. You have DEC water taking permit and Army Corps wetland permit, but we'll go through these, to make sure that we have all involved and interested agencies as well. So we can certainly be working towards seeker, but I think we'd really like, again, our professionals to dive a little deeper into the design and get us our comments, and then we'll look at our zoning and just talk about the concept. Okay?
Okay.
Thank you. Do you, just actually one last thought, do you have a sense of what this building's going to look like, what you've been thinking about visually, or it's way too early? And you're thinking more floor plans?
It's a bit too early.
No elevation, no nothing?
No, sort of conceptual?
We're working on that now.
Okay,
Yes.
okay. It's going to be a big colonial, right?
A lot of vinyl siding.
So, all right. Now, I'm just curious if you had a
Just
concept.
starting to work on it now.
Okay. All right. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So you want to grab the extra chairs?
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Joel. Just disregard, there was an item at the top of the agenda with regard to Outback Steakhouse that shouldn't be there. So we're to returning projects. The next item on the agenda is Eagle View Estates. And while we wait for them, Noreen, did we get minutes or no?
No, we're not gonna have them.
Okay. So maybe for the next meeting? Okay. Hello. Good evening.
Good evening. How's everyone?
Very well. It's getting cold.
That's outside. We'll
And-
leave the
and
cold
dark.
outside, yeah. Well,
So where are we at this, I think the last item in particular that we had to address was the watershed overlay, water supply overlay district, the limitations on impervious surface coverage, and where we are with that. So, and depending on the outcome and where we are, I don't know if we're going to take action this evening, if we have to do an extension, but that's all we have to talk about this evening.
sure.
So if you want to start, David?
Absolutely. So we addressed all the comments from the last meeting. You have our responses in the cover letter that's dated October 31st, 2019. I believe we answered them and satisfied those comments in a good way. We presented a design that addresses the impervious surface and the lot coverage. It does introduce a design for the private road that has produced some discussion regarding using the grass pavers. We believe the grass paver, obviously it's an impervious surface, and it allows for water penetration and water quality control. We believe it's an excellent design for this project. We stated in the email the benefits of the grass pavers, how it's an upgrade to what the code specifies for the road. The code specifies basically an oil and chip composition, which you see on the street anywhere. It's without question the grass pavers are an upgrade due to their quality, due to the impact on the site, the cost associated with it, and it's a perfect fit for this part of the project. While it's not in our submission, I did want to reach out to other independent sources or regarding the grass pavers. We did get further information of where else it's being used on DOT projects and on shopping centers, especially with the manufacturer of Unilock. I can distribute that. We have an email from them showing that, again, many other agencies view the use of grass pavers as an upgrade to what's conventionally specified. And in fact, what even specified in the village code is minimal at best. That's why it says in the beginning paragraph the following minimal or minimum requirements. I believe we provided beyond a shadow of a doubt that the grass pavers and the design that we have for the private road far exceed that, and it satisfies the lot coverage. With that, I like to just pass these out so that the board can take a look at it, and while we continue the discussion.
So while David does that, Mark, in terms of our private road specifications, does this meet, in your opinion, what would be required, and are there waiver, do we have a waiver ability, and if we do have a waiver ability, is this something that you would recommend as far as a design for this particular project?
I'll speak just to the private road. I have other comments in my review, but specific to the private road code, the code is specific in what is required. The code, to my understanding, provides for the ability for the highway superintendent to consider waivers, not
Okay.
the board relative to roads. I have to say that even if the highway superintendent agrees 100% this is an improvement, he thinks it's appropriate, that'd be great for this applicant, but the ability to change town law is not a consensus procedure. You have to follow statute. And the law requires that the waiver be granted to not build it the way it's shown both in the text of the code and the detail of the code. So the information is informative, but ultimately, and the highway superintendent has considered waivers in the past, so this could be brought to him, and if he believes it's an appropriate waiver to be granted, he could do so. He has communicated with the board in prior projects and indicated no objection and in effect granted the waiver. So if the board cares for Dave and I to meet with him and head down that road, I certainly am willing to do so. I have a good working relationship with him, and he generally asks that I sit down with him and go over these type of issues. So I can do that. So relative to the private road, in direct answer to your comment, no, it doesn't meet the code, but a waiver could be considered.
But ultimately, that waiver would be considered by the highway superintendent?
Yes.
As opposed to the planning board?
Correct.
Okay. Is that in streets and sidewalks, or which section is that in, do you recall?
A63.
So it's the subdivision
Nope, it's in the.
Oh,
town
road specifications for town roads. Okay.
There's a waiver provision at the end giving the highway superintendent the ability to grant waivers for that section of the town code.
Okay. So this is the section for everybody's benefit. So it says, he shall have the authority to modify the requirements of these specifications when, in his opinion, conditions make it impracticable to follow the strict letter of these specifications, when conditions make it unnecessary to do so, and when it's in the best interest of the town of Monroe. So those would have to be his findings, when you communicate to him that it's impractical to follow the strict letter, when conditions make it unnecessary to do so, and when it's in the best interest of the town of Monroe. So with that,
And just finishing on the town road.
yeah, please.
There's two other open issues on the town road. There was a question as to whether or not the slopes were acceptable, but they are. They provided all the information to show that the private road grades were acceptable. And the fire turnaround on SP7, SP7 is where the detail is, SP5 is where the turnaround is shown, does meet the, I believe it's appendix B of the state code for fire turnaround, so that's fine. The dimensions he shows meet that requirement, so those two issues have been put to rest as maybe.
Are there any other comments you had beyond those? You have a comment letter?
Yeah, just, my notes from I thought tonight was a workshop, so I just had it as a workshop review.
Okay.
But acknowledge the fully rocks have been removed, the slopes of the road were fine, we discussed the construction of the road. Conservation easement markers, the detail seems fine. The note that Dave has is fine, but on sheet SP5 where the marker's called out, it should say typical, because that is pointing to one, but it's typical of all the ones shown around, so that someone in the field doesn't say, well, I only promised you one.
Okay.
That didn't happen, so that's why we need to have it say typical of 6 or typical of 10, whatever.
Right.
We have received a response from John O'Rourke from Mike and Tully, the consulting engineer for Luna Basin Sewer Commission. They've reviewed calculations, details, and the design plan. They've written off on the sewer design, so thankfully that's been put to rest. There were some comments from the town's hydrogeologist that we need to make sure one way or another have been resolved. And then the conservation easement notes, meets and bounds and such, we just need to make sure that it's closed out by the time we get to the end of the process. That Ashley will, I'm sure, have a significant participation in. And the last legal document, which I'm not quite sure where it stands, is the easement and road maintenance agreement, if it's been finalized. That just needs to be closed out as well. So those are my notes.
And this is a workshop, so you're right. We're just because of timing, we have you on this agenda since we're bumping up against.
I got confused when you introduced me as a regular meeting.
My
I
apologies.
thought maybe I had missed something on the schedule.
Ashley, do you have comments?
Sure. So as you had noted that we are up against that timeline as far as the board taking action, so there really are two options. The first would be to extend, the applicant and the board could agree to extend that deadline so that you could continue to review this proposal with the highway superintendent if that's the route you want to take, or if you want to submit something different. Of course, you could also always go for a variance as well with respect to the coverage. Another item with the coverage, I don't know, Mark, whether you had looked at this or not, but to increase above the 15%, you also need to have stormwater controls that show potential water quality impacts are reduced to pre-development standards. So I don't know if anything specific was submitted on that, or...
I'm going to defer to Sean, since Sean's been reviewing that aspect.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything to date, and I know we're going to be reviewing if the waiver is granted, we could review the pavers. I know that is mentioned in the stormwater design stuff.
As far as further water quality measures, at least in relation to lot 61, I know that it goes through all 3 lots. They all have the swale, for lot 61, in addition to the grass pavers that we're proposing, the driveway and the sidewalk are also permeable pavers, which are quite similar to another water quality measure. So I know that if that isn't sufficient enough, then we can definitely work out what further quality measures are required to make it sufficient to call it a water quality measure enough for each lot, but
I think the calculations to show that it is, meets the water quality volume.
two pre-development conditions.
Correct,
Okay.
correct.
And that's for all three of the lots, because they're all above that 15% coverage.
Correct.
Just a couple of other comments. The conservation easement and the road maintenance agreement, I'll work with the applicant's attorney to finalize those. Been revising those, so working on that. And we did notice one plan correction on sheet SP5. The proposed conservation easement marker, it says refer to detail on sheet SP5. That should say the details on SP7. And I guess that's it. So it's really in the applicant's hands what you want to do as far as extending the deadline for a decision, so that you could work with the highway superintendent, or?
Yeah, so let's reiterate so we're all clear. So there's two outstanding concerns. One would be the private road design, which needs to be discussed with the highway superintendent, and then the proof or calculations of our water quality controls, especially if the superintendent grants us that relief from the code, because we'll also be using those grass pavers within that calculation and within that method or approach for water quality control. So those are the two outstanding concerns. Am I correct?
Could you repeat that when you say if he allows us to?
Well, if he gives us the relief from the code that we seek and allowing us to use grass pavers, that would also become a part of the water quality control that we're proposing for the site.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And then we have to, so part of this determination also is do impervious surface pavers, or do those grasscrete pavers, whatever they're called, that is considered pervious, not impervious? And that's a question I have. It's not.
I believe
in the submission.
In the definition it is, I believe.
Yeah.
Okay. So I would just want to make sure that that's actually the case, that we're not going down this road of using pavers when in fact that's still considered impervious surface area, because then that's not going to solve that particular aspect of the, and I don't know if we need to ask anybody to weigh in.
I'd be curious, Mark, what your opinion would be of pervious pavers. I think they have a lifespan, and over time they become impervious as they get filled with sediment. And perhaps the grass pavers are good because there'll always be grass, but maybe they have limited lifespan with that too.
Yeah, it's a concern because even with pervious pavement, the maintenance to maintain the pavement in a pervious function needs heavy maintenance. So you're probably right that in the long term, there's the potential that these grass pavers could grow into, pun intended, being acting in an impervious manner.
Yeah, I think we have to just in general look at that against our definitions, because with grass pavers, we at least have grass, which is different than purely pavement that happens to be pervious. Because our impervious coverage limitations are in part intended, it's not just about stormwater, but it's also about green space and landscaping, et cetera. And obviously, especially the pervious pavement, we're not going to achieve that objective. So I think that's something we have to look at in general, but you're proposing, the grass type paver. So that being said, ultimately, we can't even move forward without some discussion with the highway superintendent. So it's the highway superintendent, and then based on his determinations, and also I think we need to make sure that the grass pavers,
Probably before we meet with John Cherney, we should know the answer to how the code treats the pavers.
Yeah.
just so we know if that really is providing a benefit or not based on the code.
So let's do,
That's covering a different section of the code, which John would have no
right,
waiver authority on.
okay.
And could that possibly set precedent for future
Well,
approval?
relative to John's waiver,
Yeah, or, accepting grass paver as a substitute?
I think on John's waiver, the wording of A63 is such that it's, and Ashley, correct me if I'm wrong, it's geared toward a site-by-site analysis that the waiver can be granted if there's certain impracticalities in meeting the code and still meeting the good of the town of Monroe for access and safety and such. So I think that's worded, it's almost worded as if it was almost a variance type approach where it was.
So he could treat yours separately from others.
So I'm not so concerned about that,
Okay.
given the wording of the code.
Okay. But I think there's a bigger question as to what's impervious and what's not. That will need
It's a global
to,
issue from another portion of the code.
right.
And please remember, board members, we're only proposing it for 4 feet on each side of the road.
Right.
Within the main body of the road is 18 feet of your specified material.
So
So it's not an overwhelming portion of it.
I think that the question is, you're also proposing permeable pavers elsewhere for the driveway on another lot, so.
Yeah,
Correct.
but that's,
Not for the road, but just as far as the permeable versus impermeable.
how
question.
does,
yeah, but that's standard in the industry. I mean, a homeowner can decide to use asphalt for their driveway or pavers or whatever they would like. They could leave it as gravel. So that's not a concern of the board. I mean, we use it if we are using it to decrease the lot coverage, but it's still a private homeowner's
Right.
decision.
I don't know, I wouldn't say that's a global thing. I think it depends on the regulations. I don't know that our regulations specify what the material should be for a driveway. There are some codes that will say a driveway has to be paved, but I don't know that that's in our code per se. But
So,
with regard to the use of the grass pavers, how does that change? So meeting this water supply overlay district, does that get you to the 15% or it doesn't still get to the 15%? It just gets you to the 35%?
Correct.
So then the question is, so that's where the question comes in with the stormwater. What additional measures are provided to the satisfaction of the town and to our engineer, if that's sufficient to make up for the fact they're not doing 15%. So then you have to look at what additional stormwater measures. And all of this is related to the fact that the runoff goes to Walton Lake, which is the Village of Chester's water supply. So that's why those regulations were put into place in the first place. I mean, just to give everyone, the benefit of understanding why those regulations are there.
and
So-
grass pavers define that.
So-
It's used for that reason.
So, but those only get you to 35%, so there's still additional, right?
Correct.
Right.
Yeah, the hope is that with the grass pavers, it allows for the stone and I've always used it in other applications as a partial water quality measure because it percolates water through the paver medium and kind of cleans it as it goes. So it's not something like a infiltration basin or something as extreme as like a filter, but it definitely has a quality aspect to it, and so that's our idea in using pavers for that.
So, but again, that gets us to 35%.
Correct.
Now, what other changes might have been made? Were there changes made to the building size or to anything else to get you to the 35%, or it was strictly the pavers? Do you recall? Did you change the footprints
The
or?
footprint of the one house.
Yeah, I think
That was
for lot-
on the first lot, the one off of?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I think for lot 61, it was decreased by
A foot.
a foot on the long side, if I'm
Okay.
not mistaken. So
Okay. So what's happening is we're only getting to 35% with that stormwater technique. So, okay, so our engineers have to look at then the 35% from the 15%, right?
Well, no, we're supposed to meet the 35%.
I thought no, but I don't think that's the way it's worded.
You have to meet the 15% unless the planning board finds, with consultation of the town engineer, that it could be increased up to 35% because you have stormwater quality controls that reduce potential impacts to pre-development
Right, so
conditions.
you're supposed to be at 15%.
Okay.
So
Provided-
you've actually brought yourselves down to 35%.
Correct.
That's so what additional measures are you introducing for the 15 to 35% that you're above the 15%, if you understand?
Right, yeah, so the code says that the stormwater quality controls will reduce potential water quality impacts to pre-development conditions. So that has to, I guess, what we need to do is find further discussion with the town engineers to understand if we are or if we need to get to that point, if it is not already.
I think if you provide the calculations to prove that you've treated the water quality volume, which is typically, for any other SWIP, that's the volume that must be treated for the water quality aspect. As long as that's been treated, in my opinion, they would meet that
Okay.
requirement.
Yes.
Sure.
So that's the path then?
Okay,
Okay.
excellent.
And so again, because to go to 35%, we rely on our engineer to tell us that they have provided the stormwater controls necessary, yes.
On the road modification issue, just to be clear, I'm actually going to end up talking to both the highway superintendent and the code enforcement officer, because we've got two situations. One, will the highway superintendent grant the waiver? He wears two hats in the fact that he's the fire chief, so we get that input as a second order free advice, as it may be. But we also have the code enforcement officer who has to make a determination that the road as constructed meets the state guidelines for access. So I will be talking to both of them.
Okay.
Just to make sure, so that we dot all our i's and cross all our t's, so we don't come back here believing everything is resolved and a waiver's been granted by the highway super, and then Ben has an issue with it and setting a precedent for access and not complying with the state code. So I'll make sure from both of those gentlemen that it's resolved.
Right, we don't want to surprise you at the building permit stage that,
We agree 100%. Happily, the holidays are coming. Unfortunately, though, time is a commodity. So we'd like to, when can we do this?
so I don't think there's going to be sufficient time by Tuesday, which is our next meeting. So our next workshop meeting would be when, Noreen?
I got a question in
Actually
the
have it.
meantime, while she looks at that. On the detail that you showed for the 4-foot wide
December 12th.
pavers.
Thank you.
I know, let me just ask one question, Anthony, and I'll have to take. It's December 12th, when's the submission date?
Is November 28th.
Okay, so we need time to have this meeting, a decision, and then implement it before November 28th.
Do you want to be put on the regular agenda? Would that give you more time?
No, I want to reduce the time. We would rather submit November 28th.
Okay.
So I'd like to
So
have the meeting, I'd like to expedite the meetings. Let's have them.
Okay.
Let's get the discussion going, but not on November 27th. You know, we like to do it
That's the
earlier.
submittal date is November 27th.
Oh, it's not,
Well,
okay.
Well, the
You're
28th
taking time away from me. It's going quick enough. Come on.
Thanksgiving Day, and I'm not
Oh,
going to
it
be in
is.
the office.
That's,
And we're closed on Friday,
Yeah.
and you don't want to push it till Monday.
no, so
So
it's
it's
the
the
20, so now
27th at
time is
noon.
of the essence, even that much more.
Right.
So
So,
we're going to need a couple of days to implement whatever decision's made. So let's schedule this meeting as soon as possible.
so with that, Ashley, what do we need from the applicant as far as consent to extend the decision-making period for this subdivision to December, what did we say?
December 12th.
So I would
December 12th.
actually, just for logistics, we need to obviously prepare a resolution, and that's going to be dependent on whatever new plan submitted. If that's acceptable at the workshop meeting, then I could do that before, I guess, the next meeting, the next regular meeting. So that way, everything's incorporated from that Thursday. So I would ask that they consent to extend it to the next regular meeting, which is, they'll be on the workshop, but then depending on what
Okay.
happens there.
So we'll have you on the workshop agenda, and then if everything's in order, we can make the decision at the regular meeting, which is, several working days later.
17th.
Okay, yes, please grant us that extension.
Just so the applicant, is the applicant here?
Yes.
Just if you could, for the record, just consent that you're extending the 62-day deadline for making a decision on the application to December 17th? Is that what? Sure, no, that you consent, we just want to confirm you're consenting to extend the
17th.
62-day timeframe for making a decision on the subdivision application until December 17th.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. And then hopefully everything will be in order at that time. If not, we could talk about, the options moving forward.
Great.
Okay?
Okay.
All right, we have a path.
I have a question.
Oh, Anthony. So
And
sorry,
I'm glad you
Anthony.
pointed out the distinction that there's a 4-foot edge to the road. It's not the full road.
Correct.
That's important. So I'm looking at the detail that you have the road and you have the swale on the high side, and then you have the 4-foot strips on each side of the road. On the downside, you have grade below the pavers. Did you mean to have the grade equal the pavers? Because I assume that you're going to maintain those grass pavers by mowing, and you want to pave without having a 4-inch lip alongside the edge of those pavers. So you might have to modify that detail.
Yeah, we'll definitely take a look at that. From my understanding, it's probably supposed to be pretty level, at least for a few feet past the grass pavers. So,
Slope away.
Okay.
and then slope away.
Thanks.
Any questions, board members? Everybody understands the process at this point?
Sounds good.
All right. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.
So we'll see you in December.
Yes.
Okay. Workshop first.
Thank you.
Extra copy?
Do we have an extra copy of this for me so I can?
Yeah, sure. You
file?
can have this. Yeah. Do you
You
want
gave
it?
me it?
I have it. There you go.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Next item on the
Oh, no, I took
agenda
one too, so.
is HBP, Harriman Business Park, Lot 4B N space. Good evening.
Good evening.
You could introduce yourselves, please.
George Lithgow from Jacobitz and Gubitz, project attorney. Have to say I'm not used to being here for the most complicated item on your agenda.
Nate Burns with Langen Engineering. I'm the landscape architect involved in the project.
I'm sorry, your last name?
Burns, B-U-R-N-S.
Thank you.
I am Christian Green with RD Management. We're the owners of the property.
All right, welcome.
Excuse me, Mr. Burns, did you say Langen Tully?
Langen
Langdon.
Engineering. L-A-N-G-A-N.
All right, so why don't you give us a presentation, what we're looking at here?
So at the last meeting, we brought to you the architect with the plan for the outside of the end space on the large commercial building next to Target. And she presented the details that we hope to do as soon as possible to take place in conjunction with the renovation of the ABE space. Tonight, we have the outside plan for the landscaping and outside seating area that's proposed as a tenant amenity. It was prepared by Langen, and I'll let him talk about the details of that.
Sure. What we've submitted is essentially a plan to add about 1,350 square feet of additional paving between the currently empty building that you reviewed the plan for and the existing Target store. Today there's a number of existing trees there that we're looking to relocate to somewhere else on the site. There's also views of the back end of Target and trash and things like that. So what we're looking to do is essentially to place about a bit under 1,000 square feet of that paving from the face of the building back that will be specifically for the use of the new end cap tenant some food hall use or something like that. And then another approximately 350 square feet to create the connection to the existing sidewalk. At this point, we believe the paving material to either be unit pavers or stamped decorative concrete of some sort. We're still working that out with the owner. In the rear of the space, back towards the target loading area, we're looking at having a small fence so that there's some sort of access control to keep people from cutting through. Also, it'll provide a visual barrier so that you're not looking back at that service area any longer. We're providing a landscape separation against the wall of Target, a landscape bed with mixed flowering and evergreen plant material, along with low perennials to just really make that space look a lot nicer than it does today. And then in the rear, kind of a grass multi-use area that if people wanted to walk around or something in there, they could. In addition to that, we're contemplating with the owner the potential, and it's shown kind of as a dashed line that there would be some sort of access control on here to who the ultimate user is. On the right-hand side of the page, you can see generally some of the ideas and some of the different design characteristics that we're looking at. We're looking for some low-level lighting, although any kind of actual lighting for outdoor seating there would be really provided in concert with the building architect, and we're not sure that that's part of the program absolutely yet. Pavers, some sort of decorative metal fence that would be typical of what we would be looking to install, and then cafe tables and lounge chairs around the circular area.
Mark or Sean, do you have a chance to review this application?
I did. I think they've given a good introduction relative to that we won't call it alleyway, but the space between the buildings to make it more attractive and appealing and useful. The cafe tables, paving, landscaping, fencing, and so on. I'm contemplating that the intent here is that it would be available for not only what's called out as retail B1A, but that it would be generally available area for patrons of the entire complex. But again, that dash line may say that it's restricted potentially for retail B1A. I don't know that that makes any difference, but I think it's an issue the board probably should have some understanding of. The access, I'm understanding over that door is the triangles conventional door. Is there regular access from retail B1A to the area?
Yes.
Just the garage door?
Yes. The triangle's a conventional door, so there's a conventional door, and then the garage door is what's shown as, kind of the offset line.
Yeah, that one's called out.
Yep.
I just want to make sure my presumption was
certainly
accurate. Obviously, we're all aware that there are water and sewer and stormwater improvements that run down through here. You may want to take that into account when you decide what type of finish you want to use. If it is a poured concrete stamped, it makes it that much more difficult to do specific location repairs, whereas if it's a paver, you could functionally remove sections and reinstall with less damage. So again, that's not really a concern how much it costs them to do a repair, but on the other hand, it may impact how easily a problem could be diagnosed and corrected if there's something with the 3 utilities that run through here. The biggest issue, and I think the board just needs to consider it and discuss it possibly with Ashley, is how you treat parking. I know in my absence it might have come up at a prior meeting. I'll just share my experience with these type of what we and my clients call seasonal temporary uses, since there's really no permanent improvements as far as structures. There are tables, chairs, landscaping, just enhancements to an existing site. Many of the persons who will use this area, in fact, will be patrons of either the retail stores or the food establishment. It's doubtful that anyone would make, maybe what they're hoping, a specific trip just to sit in this outside area. So the impact from a parking standpoint, many of our municipal clients have taken the approach that these type of seasonal uses with no permanent improvements don't have to have parking allocated for them. That said, it's my understanding that Mr. Lithgow has provided some information that shows that, in fact, there might be some excess parking because of some square footage of retail space that was approved but not built. There is as well some reserved parking areas that may in fact be available to be considered. So whichever way you treat this, my only suggestion is that you may face this again, so you might want to believe that how you're treating it may become precedent. So establish it clearly so we don't have a problem maybe applying it the next time.
Yeah, I think we wanted to understand, again, because there were approvals, you know, there were bulk standards that applied to the overall development. Do we still meet them? And I don't recall if we got that information or not, as far as the previous approvals and staying within the limits of those approvals, whether it's impervious, parking, et cetera.
I did provide Sean with excerpts from the approved plan in 2004, which was approving 300,000 square feet of retail space and 1,504 parking spaces, of which 138 were reserved for potential need that would be determined by the town. That's in the approval resolution for 2004. 2010, we went through a series of modifications of the site plan, primarily with building F, G, what was in building G. It was divided into two parts. As a result of that process, the approved building space on the site, the actual building space on the site decreased by 7,000 square feet. So applying the standard that was generated in 2004, which is approximately, it required one space per 200. So that 7,000 foot reduction in actual space on the site would correlate to 35 spaces, which were built because the parking was all constructed, but the retail space was not. So that's approximately a surplus of constructed spaces of 35, plus the 138 reserve spaces, which have never been required by the town.
Was that, when were the other individual buildings, I don't know if it's Sally Beauty or what are the other smaller buildings that are on the site?
The pad sites?
Yes.
Yeah, the pad sites are accounted for in the
They're accounted for in the 2004, okay.
So all of that space was accounted for. There is actual constructed space, 7,000 square feet less than what was approved.
Okay.
And then there's also the pad site on building, I forget what lot it is, but the pad site I, which is the one you approved 2 or 3 years ago, that's never been constructed. That had 66 spaces that were allocated to it.
So Sean received that material?
Yes.
Okay.
So
and have you had an opportunity to take a look at that?
Jordan and I discussed it.
Okay.
So I didn't delve into it, but we could look at it again to confirm all this information.
Yeah, I think we just want confirmation so we know we're within, like I said, that we don't have to worry about seasonal, et cetera. We're just within the bounds of what was otherwise approved. Getting back to the space, so the space is going to be open to users or any of the individuals who may be customers of the retail and other spaces up there. but it also will be used by the food hall as well for outdoor seating? Or what is your thought at this point, if it's going to be a kind of a separated space for use by the food hall?
I think it would depend on who leases the space. If I have someone that is maybe serving alcohol there, maybe they're not comfortable with people who are underage being in that space. And if that was the case, then I would allow them to, I guess, somehow close it off from the general public, depending on their use. But if it was more like a ice cream store or someone selling something didn't have that element into it, then I would assume they would leave it open. But then again, like I said, if they're paying for it, ultimately, they're going to want to have a little control over it.
So, in terms of maintenance, I think we need to anticipate either of those scenarios. And I'll ask the board members, but I think that if you have a business there that's involved with a liquor license, I don't know that we want it necessarily open to everybody. But as you said, if it's an ice cream place, and it's open to the public, I see less of a concern. But ultimately, who's going to maintain it? Because if it's used by multiple tenants, are the multiple tenants going to maintain it, or is, someone needs to put the chairs away, after the season? We just need to know what the concept will be for long-term use.
Ultimately, we're responsible. Of course, like I said, it depends on the nature of who we lease to. If we lease it to them and they're saying, okay, I'm leasing this with the expectation that this outdoor space is under my control, then that would probably be part of their lease to maintain it and keep it clean, and chairs and everything like that are stacked.
Okay.
But ultimately, if they didn't do it, I would do it. I wouldn't just not let it go to fall apart. Ultimately, we're responsible and we would maintain it.
Okay. Anybody?
Got
Anthony?
A question. I don't know if we discussed this, we may have, so forgive me, but is there property line issues between Target and the retail space?
The property line for Target is like 6 inches off the building.
And
it is, there are cross easements. I don't think there is an issue regarding property lines.
And they're good with having the open space against their wall and the landscaping against their wall?
Well, I've discussed it with them, and they're aware of what we're doing. And are they exactly happy? No, maybe. They're
curious.
Like I said, it's our property, and we have the right to do it. And they do things behind their property, and I don't bother them. They seem to have a barbecue, and they do other things, and I don't bother them about anything. And I'm not anticipating any issues with them. We've never had any issues over there, and it's been a good relationship.
And you're
there
not
and
fixing
many
any
other
lights
places.
to their walls or decorations onto their walls? Or
Listen, I wouldn't touch their walls. That would be.
Crossing
I
the
wouldn't.
line?
That would be.
But that brings the point, actually, a good point, which is, do they have lights or anything along the wall that they would need to still access for maintenance? I don't know what's along that wall.
Like I said, we've never had that issue, and of course, I think I don't think they have any lights on that section of the wall, but if they did or put some on there, I would never tell them no. We've never had that kind of issue. Like I said, we have Targets in many different locations, and we have a good working relationship with them.
And they want to keep it that way.
Right.
Yeah.
But we just want to anticipate for any resolution. Again, are they going to be able to access? If there's a fence, does it create a problem? We just need to know sort of what's along that wall.
Yeah, if they only have 6 inches of ownership off the building now, do they have a maintenance easement? So they have access under today's conditions, or is it just a
I don't believe they have a maintenance easement,
So-
but like I said, I think there might be something in the REA that says that if they need to get there,
They can.
with reasonable notice, we would. They just let us know, and we would let them do it.
Ashley, did you have a?
Yeah, I have a few, but just touching on that, you said it was 6 inches Target's property line off the building? Because it looks like
Approximately.
the landscaping here goes right up to the building itself. Is there that break in between?
It's the bushy part. The roots will be on the RD side.
So I think it would be helpful to just, if you could draw in a dotted line showing the actual property line. Related to that also, have you shown the limits of the easements, the water and sewer? I see them, is it the entire area in between the?
The limits of the easements are roughly drawn out. It's difficult to tell them out for sure because they're dashed lines, but if you look down at the bottom of the page, in the lower portion of retail B1B, we identify kind of the different lines and call out the easements. So, I mean, more or less that whole area there is easements from end to end, and I believe actually, if you look closest to the target at the top corner, there's a dashed line. If I remember correctly, the property line for Target is actually roughly where that dashed line is, because when this was laid out originally, it was done around the easements.
So the easements are the entire area, the
More
whole
or less
length of the side of the
entire
building
area.
then? Okay. So if that dotted line is Target's property line, then we're going to need to move in the landscaping to show that it's not encroaching on that line. Unless, of course, you want to have something from Target consenting to that. I know George submitted something from the Orange County for the sewer district, and they were okay with the improvements. Can you get something from Harriman with respect to its Harriman water easement? Is that?
That would be,
Orange County?
Orange.
No, sorry.
the water line is actually, I believe, owned by ORD, the actual
Okay.
physical structure. They have an easement to maintain it if necessary.
Who has the easement?
The Village of Harriman.
So if,
It's a maintenance easement.
if you could just.
We'll get something for you.
Exactly, just have them take a look and comment on that. So I had asked last time as far as the actual size of this outdoor space, so we could determine for purposes of seeker that it's under 4,000, the expansion's under 4,000 square feet. So if we could just get that measurement, because I see it's not just limited to the paved area, you're also using some of the green space, and I'm sure it's under, but we just want that figure for the resolution.
For seeker purposes.
The narrative says it's 1350.
So that's the pavement, but there's also, you're also showing tables in some of the green space there, some of the,
Right, that's 600.
Okay, so we'll give you the number.
just, yeah, whatever that.
Yeah. Is the measurement on the measurement is on the plan? Or is it in the memo?
We'll add the measurement to the plan for
Yeah.
clarity so that it's easy and in one place.
Okay.
Another question with that, about the pavement. Now, the total pavement, or the total pavers rather, is 1350, and then you have an arrow showing this outside area, outside the limits. I'm sorry, so the inside area, I guess, is 997 square feet, and then this outside area is an additional 100 or so, that brings it up to that 1350?
The interior area is 997, and the exterior area then would be 353 to bring us up to 1350.
So it says that that's not included in the tenant space, but there are tables shown there. I just want to make clear what that is. If it's not included in the tenant space, then what that?
It had been discussed, and it was my understanding, that was, if there was going to be a tenant delineation, we wanted to show an area that made sense for the actual tenant delineation, and that if it was going to be open to the public, that there would be kind of the, both areas, so that there would still be some sort of public aspect, even if there was a tenant delineation.
So there would still be
I think we
tables
already have
outside?
benches out there anyhow. I think there are benches along the front of the shopping center sporadically.
Yeah, I was just trying to understand the difference between the tenant area and then this other paved area that also had tables. So that'll be open for general.
Yeah, I think
use.
that we would have tables and chairs there that maybe would always be available to the public, regardless of whether or not they were attached to the operator of the end cap.
As far as the parking, so I know you had provided some plans in the resolutions this afternoon. I haven't had a chance to really look at that further. The other issue was the impervious coverage. If you could give just the increase in impervious coverage, that way we could make sure that's still compliant as well. This has had a zone change. When it was approved in 2004, it was in the HI district, and now it's in the business park overlay. So the coverage is actually, I think, allows for more, so it should be fine, but just want to look at that in the new zoning too. Your sheet SK2, which was one of your original submissions, I think, that refers to, it says for final layout of the patio outdoor dining area, see drawings by others. I just wanted to see, is that this drawing that you're referring to? Okay. This was referred, I believe, to the county last time. I don't know, I don't believe we've had a response back from them. You haven't seen anything, right?
It was definitely sent to them. Okay.
Is there a total number of tables that are being proposed? Is this what the total would be? Is there a total amount of seats you're seeking?
What do we show?
I think the total number of chairs would be whatever the zoning allows for. We spoke about this the other day, and I need to, whatever the zoning allows for us for tables and chairs occupancy-wise outside.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything in the zoning for it, so that's why we look to you to at least establish what the maximum will be for occupancy.
Then
Because
I would probably defer to the architect and engineer to give me, and Nate to give me some idea of what can fit comfortably. But my intent the other day when we were discussing this among ourselves was that I want to have the ability to show an operator what he potentially has. In other words, just as a round number, I want to say, okay, you have 20 seats inside, and you have another, say, 30 seats outside. And so potentially, he has a real business plan. And in the restaurant business, it's very important number of seats. That's how they make their money. And you have to give them that information up front. To a real operator, it's the most important thing, because they need to know how often they're going to turn those seats every night. And they need to know how much money they're going to potentially make. So, like I said, we can put together something that shows a comfortable number of tables and chairs out there based on what I think is reasonable.
Right. I think what we need is a sort of a detailed narrative, and especially what the maximums are going to be, so that we know it'll be, let's say, for argument's sake, 50 seats and not 200 seats. You know, because building permit will have to be issued, a certificate of occupancy will have to be issued. It's going to be based on at least the interior of the space on building code. I'm not so sure about the exterior, if there are particular regulations. But again, we're going to grant a resolution, and so we want the particulars so we know when whoever comes and tries to secure a building permit and certificate of occupancy, they'll know the parameters within which they're allowed to operate their business.
No, that's fair. But like I said, I was very concerned about that I don't want to leave any opportunity not to be given to someone who's going to operate the space.
Right.
So I don't want to have a situation where down the road, they go there with the impression that they can put 25 seats out there and they can only put 15. Because that, you just can't go to, real operators can't operate that way.
But at some point, we do have to approve something. Yeah. And so, just develop a number, and, if you're within those thresholds, then everything's fine. If for some reason it exceeds it, you would have to come back.
Right.
I think that's fair.
And we'll do that. We'll come up with a narrative. We'll look at potential tenant loads, identify a number of seats that seems to make sense, come to you, and that will be like a cap.
Right.
Unless we come back and ask for more.
I think it's very reasonable.
So just in terms of the plantings, if you would put whatever the quantities are going to be, and what the planting size is going to be, and then just standard notes as far as, they'll be maintained for the, for the entirety of the use. Do those particular plants, the size of the space, they'll be fine as far as being between two buildings? Are those species okay with survival? And then, did I hear that the trees were going to be relocated?
That's the current intent, is that trees would be relocated on site.
Okay, so somewhere else on the site.
Right.
is there the opportunity to keep one or two near the entrance or somewhere in there, or?
One reason that we're considering relocating them is when I discussed it with the county engineer, he expressed some concern about, in general, about having trees over
Because of the
mains.
easements, okay.
So
Makes
we'd
sense.
like to look, we'd like to get, satisfy him by getting them away from the water line and the sewer line, but we'll look to put them somewhere else on the property.
I mean, if possible, I don't know if it is possible to put maybe some, almost like street trees with the grates so that you could pop them in, just have a couple there still. Just if you could explore it, rather than moving it somewhere where, here it would have a benefit of breaking up the, the building and the concrete, whereas if it's put someplace else, it's just not as noticeable, and not as beneficial. So if you could take a look at that. In terms of light bollards, pavers, we have architectural review authority over this, so if you're showing that's going to be the decorative metal fence, that's what's anticipated. So we just want to make sure that you're okay with this, because, if it's not this, then you'll need to come back.
Question about that. He's shown one typical type of bollard, and typically, sometimes I see ARB requires a specific model be identified, which seems like a little, if it changes over the course of 2 years and you have to replace something, then that's no longer manufactured and you got to come back for approval of that specific model's replacement. Do you guys have some way to make this like it should look like this, but it need not be exactly like this?
Well, we haven't had that many, we're newly, so this is something that we're reviewing and determining as we go along. I mean, it is customary to have the name and, model number, to get a sense of, and just in general what the material is, is it wrought iron, is it aluminum, is it, we need some parameters as to what's going to be constructed. If there's something that's similar at some point down the road, a replacement, within reason, I think that would be okay, but I think we need a little bit more definition. Where we have, for instance, calling out decorative paving, is it going to be this paving, or because it could be something entirely different, which would, not be as aesthetically pleasing. So again, some parameters, some flexibility, but we need a little bit more definition than images, in my opinion.
Okay.
But again, we're willing to, you might want to specify 2 different types, that the planning board would favor. And I don't know if the board members have any reaction right now to what you see, if you want to comment on it.
Is it, Ashley, do you know if there's like a more vague way to describe these, to say regular bollards, or, I don't know, B-class bollards, or whatever, however the universe describes?
I mean, it's been done where it'll show a specific model or product type and then say this or the equivalent or comparable, something like that, to give you some flexibility in the event something changes, something more general, but
that helps.
the amount of detail, whatever the board wants as far as the amount of detail for each of the different elements, that would be appropriate.
And another tool to use along that line is to allow the engineer or the building inspector or the chairperson to make a determination. It looks enough like it that you don't have to come back and go through another plan review.
In the future.
In the future.
Yeah. But I think at the outset, we do want to have what you're intending, just so we know.
So is there any concern about what's depicted here?
My only question with the light bollard, that's LED, would it be LED?
Yeah, it's very difficult anymore to get anything
And that's not
commercial lighting manufacturer that's not LED.
Okay. And then so we're only, just always concerned with the lumen levels, that it's not really ultra bright, warm light, in terms of your K values. But, of course, best, good enough that people can see.
Right.
And so you're only proposing bollards? Is it going to be any wall-mounted lighting or pole lighting here? It was just going to be bollards?
I don't know about on the architectural plans. I can't necessarily speak to those, but we haven't looked at providing any pole-mounted lighting here,
Okay.
anything really other than bollards. I think it would be difficult within the easements really to provide anything other than bollards.
Okay. Anybody else have comments? Comments?
I think it looks like a very nice idea.
Mm-hmm.
One planning board member suggested that it would become a Starbucks.
Can't, there's one in Target.
Target.
Right, because you've never seen a Starbucks across the road from Starbucks, right?
The Starbucks operate beer.
Put a mattress place in.
I put Starbucks there, then I would have problems.
I know you would.
Target.
I know you would. So I think, the planning board, they can move forward with this and advance it, so that it can be finalized, and then you get us a narrative and some details, so that'll help Ashley with any resolutions that have to be put together, as well as confirming seeker, in terms of our square footage. All right?
Excellent.
Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is it possible we could have a draft resolution for the next meeting in December?
Depends on what you submit to us. I'll make sure Ashley isn't going away on a very long holiday vacation, so that she has the time to.
Well, as long as she's got remote access, it'll work.
All right. So we do not have any.
September 12th is in the packet, but they've not been emailed to you.
Okay, so.
I just haven't been able to scan for 2 days without internet.
So we'll take care of September 12th with the rest of them at our
fine.
regular meeting.
Okay.
And so with that, I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting. May I have a second?
No. Before we do that.
Oh, sure.
Can I just want to talk about, I don't know if we've done it or should do it next month, but talk about the planning board schedule for next year, and also talk about the process of having a technical review meeting during the day. At one time before, about a year ago, we used to have, there was no technical review, and I'm feeling that I miss a lot of the conversation, and so I'd like to have that restored.
So I don't know what the past planning board practice was. Since I've been on, it's been on actually the Friday after the workshop meetings. But if we want to discuss that, let's add it to the agenda for December.
Okay.
And then we need to talk to our professionals to see also their availability,
Sure.
beforehand, before the meetings.
Well, and then the other thing is, we had, I think it was first and third Tuesdays, and then we modified that, so maybe, we can consider talking about how we want to go forward next year.
With the meeting dates?
Yeah.
That might be a little more constrained,
Okay.
but we could talk about it.
Okay.
Okay. It was difficult at the time, actually, when I became the chairperson, to find a date that I could attend, Mark could attend, and Mike could attend. So I don't know if there's a little more flexibility with Ashley on board, but then we have to check everybody's schedules, and also check with Town Hall to see when it's available.
So if it's possible, if Ashley and Mark could kind of give us an idea what their flexibility going into next year would be, then, so we can consider that would be great.
Are there specific dates? Would it be the 1st and 3rd you're looking at, or
Yeah, or sort of an,
is there another option? Because I know the
Did
1st
the first and
wouldn't work
third
at this point.
Tuesday of every month.
is it because they're too close together, Anthony? Because why are we contemplating it?
Yeah, well, that's one, and two is sometimes the first and third aren't always consecutive weeks, and so I think having a week in between the meetings was beneficial for review time.
Okay. In general, we shouldn't be seeing many people who are on a workshop be at the regular meeting, because there's in-by dates for each of those. But we have been, if something's determined to be complete enough for, at a workshop and it's ready for approval, that's why they appear on our regular agenda. But I think we should devote a discussion.
Sure.
And let's do that at our December workshop.
Yeah, one of the things we did prior with the previous, we changed it because I think both meetings were treated rather equally, but, you know, then we became more diligent about having the first meeting as a workshop and the second meeting as a formal meeting. And I like that.
Right. So,
Since you're talking dates, Tuesdays, other than the last Tuesday, worked for me. That just didn't work because unfortunately, every time I had something available, it conflicted with Mike, so maybe now between Ashley and I, we can make it a little easier to fit into what the board would like to have.
yeah, so maybe between now and December, if all the board members, if there are dates you know, like a regular standing date that you cannot attend, then let Noreen know, and we'll kind of piece together some kind of schedule to see if there's some flexibility. I can say I know I'm probably going to be the most difficult. So I'm going to get you mine, because I'm going to 50 gazillion planning board meetings, so. But yeah, I'll send you my schedule.
Okay.
And then you'll see and say, why am I doing this?
My only request on that note is that we move the start time to 7:30, because I can't keep breaking speed laws through Tuxedo. All right, this 7 o'clock it cuts it this close to me.
So we got a couple of things to think about.
Yeah. Okay. We'll have to figure that one out. All right, so may I made a motion to adjourn. May I have a second?
Nope.
Okay.
That one.
No,
I'll second that.
all in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
Okay. We have our meetings